Hey, everybody, I'm Becky Drozdz. Thank you for tuning into the Guerrilla HR podcast. So, I was going to start out today with sharing some doom and gloom news about healthcare costs, but I've decided I don't want to go down that doom and gloom path. So, instead, I'm going to tell you about something that I did yesterday that was kind of fun. So, I was part of a panel of employers that was speaking to a group of students at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster. And so, one thing that was especially fun during this session was they asked us in this panel to talk about what core competencies their organization thinks is the most important. And so, as of course, as we go down the line, we hear things like communication and teamwork and work ethic and things like that. And so I went last for that particular question. And so my perspective of new grads and really anybody in the workforce of what's the most important is really don't be an asshole. It is that simple. That is always my advice, right? Think about how you can apply that to those other things. So think about communication. If you're huffing, if you're eye rolling, if you're not willing to take feedback from people and be polite and respectful, then you're probably being an a-hole. When it comes to teamwork, if you're not willing to contribute and work with other people, then you're probably being an a-hole. So it was kind of fun. And that's my advice to everybody is if you're trying to move ahead at work, if you're trying to get a job, don't be a jerk. It's that simple. All right, let's go ahead and get into our topic today. Our guest is Barry Wolfe. He is the founder of Argos HR Solutions, and he provides HR partnership to organizations across Western Pennsylvania and beyond. Barry has a new book out. It is called It's All in Your Head: Why Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees. So I am excited to have Barry here, and we're going to talk a little bit about value-centric leadership and thinking about leadership in a little bit of a different way. So Barry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So I read a little story about how you worked for your dad in his manufacturing facility. And so before you even knew what HR was, you were kind of already noticing some things that would make you an HR practitioner. Tell us more about that.
Well, I started with working for my dad when I was 13 years old in his manufacturing company. I was there day one. Um, yeah, I really did learn how to drive a forklift before I was old enough to drive a car. And if some of your viewers might want to say, well, aren't there child labor laws about that kind of thing? Well, anyway, yeah. It was a different time. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. We'll save that for a different episode.
that's a different episode. Yeah. But along the way, I grew up there in their, working 60-hour weeks in the summertime when I was a kid and so forth. It was a great way to grow up, quite honestly. But I got to learn what it is to work and what business is about, from a very early age. And I left after high school. I worked there for a little bit afterwards, and I went. Believe it or not, I toured with a musical group for a couple of years, and but I
Oh,
came back and I
wow.
was yeah, that's a different podcast too. But anyway, but I came back and I was going to go to college and or I was going to go to grad school, I think it was, or something like that. Anyway, my dad asked me, "How'd you like to be the HR guy for the company?" It had grown considerably since all that, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." So I said that not really knowing what HR is.
Hmm.
So I had to learn it by just reading some books and getting my nose bloody a couple times and
Yep, yep.
off to the
And
races.
then just dove right in.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm still cleaning up my nose, I think, after all these years. Somewhere down
We're all cleaning up things that we
there.
did along the way. That's
Yeah,
part
we
of
all have those.
life's journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like you, I was functioning somewhat in an HR capacity before I could even spell HR. I worked one college at a marina and it was on a lake. My parents lived on this lake up in North Carolina. And I worked at the marina during a summer, I don't even know, maybe between like freshman and sophomore year, I don't know, college. And
Yeah.
so this marina had like, of course, we sold tons of beer and sweet tea. That part was covered,
North
but they
Carolina,
also
yeah.
had a little food counter. And so in the morning, we would get a rush from the fishermen, like all the people who are coming out to fish, and they had fishing competition. So at like 5 a.m., we open and we would be busy with all these people who are getting a little breakfast before they went out to fish. And one morning, this big tray of food, it wasn't designed like for big trays of food to be balanced and set out. But this huge tray of food was sitting on this little tiny like column dividing wall and it got knocked over. And so the manager started just screaming at all of us about, and cursing at us and wasting things and da, da, da. And here's little old me. Like, I don't know anything. I'm 18 years old. And I said, stop. We are all working really hard this morning. Nobody dropped that on purpose. And I just walked away because I just was like, why is he going to scream at you? You're not going to scream at me. Like, this is an accident. And so that was my first foray into like management. Talent management is one to like, this is not how you address people. This is not
Yeah.
how we communicate. And so I thought, well, I'm about to get fired, but I don't care. This is a summer job at the marina, so
Yeah,
it's
right.
fine. But fortunately, like after the, I after I walked away, I went outside and some of the people who had been inside, they were like, good for you. You got to stand up for yourself and stand up for those workers. And I was like, okay, I like this. This feels pretty good. And then later the guy actually came out and apologized and was like, you're right. I shouldn't have been yelling at everybody. So it ended up being good. But, at that time, I didn't even know what HR was. But really, I feel like, something inside me was a natural inclination that, led me that this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
So
So getting into something, more pertinent to HR today versus my, 18-year-old story. Tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've done. I know that one of the things that you talk about is that there's a disconnect between what's happening in corporate land versus what happens in reality, especially where HR is concerned. Tell us a little bit more about that.
there's so much we could talk about in that regard, where to
Yeah.
start?
Yeah.
For one thing, at the corporate level, it's so easy. And I've been at the corporate level. My last day job, I was, VP of HR for a nationwide business. And, when you're on Mount Olympus up there, it's really easy to look out the lovely window from the conference room and, think it's all homogenous. You can,
Mhm.
and I've noticed in different, people I've worked for, which were, and I've only ever worked for multi-site organizations prior to starting my own company. But you know, y- it's easy for the owner of the business or the president to see everything. It's like it's all homogenous, and
Mhm.
they can talk so eloquently. You could go out and spend a couple days, and you're at one site, and then you come back and you're in the room with the boss and some visitor or other is in the conference room, and the president wants to go on about well, we do this and we're all about that and our people think that, and it's like 3 days ago I was out in the middle of the country there and hanging out with some people on a back shift. Yeah, that's not what they're seeing
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
So it's it's a very um it's a sort of uncomfortable reality. And the sad thing is, in a way, and again, it's one of those things we could talk a lot about. But the consulting world is about selling a vision of homogeneity to a large extent. In other words, you know, the management consultants of the world, they want to talk about your culture, and it's this nice, easy, bite-sized kinds of packages to sell the people to write the checks. And you know, um, there's a sense where that's true, but there's a bigger sense where it's not. And I really think I've come to very passionately believe, having decades of dealing with people issues, that we talk about a corporate culture. But look, the reality is your corporate culture is what your frontline supervisors, decide it's going to be, for better or
Yes.
worse.
Yes, because they are the company to the employees.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
not what corporate puts out in a mission, vision, values statement or, posts on the wall.
Yeah.
It really is that interaction between their first line
Yeah.
supervisor.
Yeah. If they,
Yeah.
it's about what kind of people they are and what they think is the right thing to do and what's not. And, if there's one thing I've learned in my career, like the one lesson above all is everything is leadership. Everything comes down to leadership. And that includes, though, all the way down, but to the folks who are really managing your people, deciding who's doing what today, who gets off, who gets
Mhm.
recommended for a raise, and who probably needs a performance improvement plan or something like that. Those are the people that are really enforcing your corporate culture.
Yeah.
And that's what you really have to put your effort into, and not, I don't know, cultural readiness assessments and things like that.
Yeah. So an assessment or something that's a tool for an evaluation, but if it's not giving you an accurate picture of what's truly happening, especially if it's different by location, then how do you take
Yeah,
action on that?
absolutely. And you can even see it if you ever work in like a multi-shift organization.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody anywhere knows this, but look what it is on day shift
Yeah.
when all the big guys are, the big people are all there running around versus on the back shift. Um, it's two completely different organizations,
Oh, for sure,
and
for sure.
everybody knows.
I've had all of these experiences. I've had the multi-site thing happen where they were even within the same city. I worked for an organization that had 2 different facilities that were probably 10 miles apart, and the whole vibe in one to the other, completely different,
Yeah,
like, just a few miles apart. But
absolutely.
then, especially what you're saying with the night shift as well, I worked for, a 24/7 manufacturing facility, and definitely just the atmosphere, the work, what happened on night was very, very different than
Yeah,
what happened on days. I always
yeah,
said that, I felt like it would have been easier to be on nights because you didn't have all of management in the building.
yeah,
Yeah, and it always seemed like, that might actually be a little bit nicer, except that whole staying awake at, 2 and
yeah.
3 AM
Well,
does
there's
not,
that. Yeah,
that part of it does not work for me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I know you talk about too is the concept of value-centric leadership. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a concept. If I can make a shameless plug, by the way, I go into this in my newest book, which is called. How about that? I got a book, and it's called.
Yay.
Yeah, it's called "It's All in Your Head," and the subtitle is "Why Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees Deliver Value and What Can." And so the first part of the book is talking about the story of really the relationship between business and psychology, which has been to a very large extent kind of the cornerstone of the employment relationship for a long, long time. And I think it's something I've over the years, my own involvement in those kinds of tools left me very skeptical about it all, and it made me want to
Mhm,
do a lot more of a deeper dive in understanding where did all this stuff come from. And long story short, I've come to what I think is a well-researched reason, which I go through in my book, stepping through why this just isn't really what everybody thinks it is, and it doesn't deliver the answers that employers are really looking for. And so some years ago, I came to this conclusion and thought, well, look, what if we just throw all that out and start over?
mhm,
And it took me several years getting an answer worth talking about. Took several years, but basically the idea is behind what I call value centric leadership is not about values, because again, it's like you were mentioning, like we got vision statements and our mission statements. And we got vision stuff and
yeah,
values. We got all that covered. Thank you very much.
yeah. But those are just
Um,
words if you don't have behaviors to
for
back it
sure.
up.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But what I started to think about it was in terms of, well, what is it, in a private company, for example, or a public company, what's it really all about? And it's really got to be about delivering value. That's not a new statement. You'll see lots and lots of people smarter than
Sure.
me for sure who write about we have to connect people to value creation, and everybody preaches that.
Mhm,
But if you ask them, well, how am I supposed to do that? What does that actually look like? I mean, and I say this to people who I respect, a couple of these people I've met, who write books talking about these kinds of things, but they're very short on the plan. How
mhm,
exactly am I supposed to do it? So it took me a few years of working around this and a few false starts, but I've come up with what I think is the process for doing that. And one of the things that distinguishes, well, there's two things I guess I would say that distinguish it. First of all, um, it the starting point is not on what people do. And
mhm,
because one of the reasons I say that is because, if we go back to grammar 101, so doing is a verb, right? And if we think about what is value in any organization, value is not a verb. No one buys a verb.
mhm,
Whatever your organization does, it's a noun. Even Walt Disney World, they tell their employees, we produce happiness. They
mhm.
don't produce a verb. They produce happiness. And there's something, or usually more than one thing, oftentimes very analogous in any organization. So we have to start with what are the nouns? What are and the way I like to think of it is what are the value added deliverables that an organization exists to put in somebody's hand, leave on the desk when they go home at night, change in the wider
Sure.
world. And it's not just for customers, because if you think about it, I think about it in terms of um, this isn't my own thing, of course, but what's value? And value is basically, the reward, or that's what people give you money for. So of course, customers, clients give money, but they're not the only ones. If you think about it, a bank gives your organization money, or investors give you money, but they care about certain things your customers don't. Your customers don't care about your cash flow, and your bank doesn't necessarily care about your chipper customer service in a way.
Mhm.
So you have to take a look at, through all these different lenses, who's giving us money and what are the nouns that they want. So the way I come to think of it then is drilling that down through a business into at the employee level, is to think about it in terms of, we pay people to perform activities, but it should be because we want to buy results. And so we should be thinking
Yes.
about, based on, if we're clear on what are those things for which the, people give an organization money. Well, what do people deliver? Again, put in somebody's hand, leave on the desk when they go home at night, change in the wider world, that the boss really wants to buy. And
Mhm.
when you think about it that way, it's you start to understand a job through a very, very different lens. And I think that getting there, however, takes the other distinguishing feature of value-centric leadership, which is that, somebody like me who's a consultant, and I work with companies on implementing this, but it really involves very hard thinking on the part of the leadership, in particular the boss. And most business, I've my own little maxim I've learned over the years in business is, given a choice between thinking hard and spending money, most business presidents would rather spend money. And I don't mean to say they're stupid, but it's just, look, they're busy. You
Yeah.
know, uh, Extensive bandwidth isn't really a feature of the job. Um, so it's hard to get them to just shut the door, and think hard about something. But
Mhm.
that's what it takes if you're going to truly answer these questions in ways that your organization, that you that you can start creating accountabilities for people
Yeah.
for. But So once we have that, we can really truly, and I guess I put it this way, we tie it back to your point earlier. When you shared your story about somebody dropping something and the boss taking everybody's heads off about it.
Mhm.
And it comes back to, I think, in a bigger sense, one of the reasons that that's so outrageous is, we can talk about it in terms of fairness, of course. But look, yes, it may just be a summer job for you and everybody else, but everybody goes into a job wanting to be successful. Okay?
Mhm.
Nobody actually wants to just go through the motions in the job. They really don't.
Yeah.
People want to be successful. And I really believe that the essential definition of what should be, I think, is the definition of leadership, or the central challenge, is, how do you help every person in an organization succeed? And that means, first of all, you have to understand, well, what is success? And again, going by what so it's and the way I like to think of it is, how could you start somebody day one in an organization, and and be able to explain to them, here's, if you want to get a raise here, this, you give me these things on these kinds of levels,
Mhm.
that's worth more money. I believe that the central challenge, in any business, everybody, when they start a job day one, they want to ask a question, and nobody asks it because I don't think they're going to get an answer. I put this, by the way, in front of groups of business presidents and asked, "What do you think that question is?" Nobody ever got it, and I tell them, "I promise you, you get this answer, 100% of you are going to agree with me." And that question is, "What do I got to do to get a raise around
Mhm.
here?" And everybody laughs, and I say, "Now look, the funny thing is, if it's your salesperson, quick, what's the answer?" And everybody can instantly say, "Oh, bring in more sales." Yeah,
Yep.
that's right.
Yeah.
Why is the salesperson the only person in the organization that can get that answer?
Yeah.
Why not every person? Because if you can't answer that,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
I'm, like, sitting quietly, but, I this is, like, in my area too. So a lot of my work in my consulting space is focused on compensation and total rewards, and
yeah,
so I have these conversations where organizations want to have some type of variable pay at all levels, which I think is fantastic,
sure,
but it's exactly like you're saying, where it has to be on what's the deliverable, what
yeah,
is the creation, what's the noun, if you
yeah,
will, because
yeah,
it's not task, it's not being busy. And so it's very much things that what are they creating that's adding value to the organization, but it also, they have to have line of sight where they have to have some control and authority over it, because I have seen that backfire in an organization that was doing some profit sharing across all levels, which is fantastic. Love that, right?
yeah.
But they saw some of their senior leaders traveling back and forth to different sites and going first class and bringing their golf clubs, and they're like, if they're in procurement, they're like, well, why do I buy the pens that cost 3 cents less when I see this person,
Oh, yeah.
on these fancy flights. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of, back to, well, where's the value in what you're
Yeah.
doing that's going to drive your profit sharing? So
Yeah.
I think it is important just to, really focus on what it is that somebody's creating. I
I'd love to have a
also think
conversation
about
with you
this
about
in the like remote work and work from home. And so I
that.
would hear people say, well, how do you manage people who, if you can't see them? Well, I could tell you, I could sit in somebody's office for 8 hours and look at the internet and buy shoes all day, right? Like, so like if you want a warm body in a seat, like I can do that, but that's
Yeah,
not, nobody's paying me to shop for shoes, right?
exactly.
I think it comes right back to what you're saying. I mean, I think this really does tie into so many different areas where it is, what are you doing that's creating value, not just being busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if I could give you one little example,
Yeah, yeah.
I touch on this in my book. I was thinking about this when in the context once of, can you really answer this for everybody in your organization? I was thinking about it when I was going to the dentist, and I said hi to, Kathy, the dentist receptionist, and sat down, and I thought to myself, now how does Kathy create value in this organization? And one thing I thought about, and for the record, I went back and I asked my dentist. I shared this part of my book, and I said, does this make sense? And he said, yeah, it really does. So, one of the things I thought about, if I was going to make up, so what's Kathy? Okay, it's a small office. She hasn't got a job description, but okay, we could take a shot at what's probably in one. And one of the things would be, I know this, that she calls patients when somebody cancels,
Mhm.
so that you can go through a couple different things. And if you look at that, and she cleans the files and that, you look at that, and if you want to say, what are the things that you could give Kathy's replacement? You could tell Kathy's replacement, day one, you give me these things and it's worth more to you. If you're looking at it in terms of the duties, the make phone calls, be nice to people, whatever, nothing jumps out. But if you take a look at the thing of, the issue of scheduling people when there's a cancellation. Now, my daughter happens to work at she's a dental hygienist, and I asked my daughter, actually, full disclosure, she's a hygienist in that office. She's my hygienist. But anyway, I asked her, so when how many cancellations on average would you say you get in a week? And she said at least 5. So knowing what my daughter makes, if I do a little bit of back of the
Mhm.
napkin math, that's like $40,000 a year that costs that organization. Now, it's not
Wow.
a very big practice. I'm guessing they're carrying, a little bit of debt here and there. So 5 years, that's $200,000 that
Yeah.
would, you
That's
know?
nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's not. And
Yeah.
so if you start thinking about it that way, you can recognize that this job is one of the things it's about is not just being nice and answering phones. It's about making sure that staff is fully utilized, that
Yeah.
billable people stay billable.
Yeah.
And I was showing this interesting. I was talking about this with an entrepreneur friend of mine, and I love what he said about it. I had to put it in the book, but he said, "Boy, all of a sudden this job doesn't look so overhead, does it?" And it's true. And who wants to go to a job and be overhead? No one
Yeah.
dreams of being overhead. But it
Yep.
goes back to this idea of when you can understand it this way, and you can explain, these are the things I need from you. It's a very different set than what we traditionally think of on a job description, where it's just
Mhm.
do this stuff. So, which I suspect one of the reasons I saw the twinkle in your eye there, in your compensation development practice, you clearly recognize this as a challenge, and it's just because
Oh,
it's how
yeah.
we think about jobs.
Yes, yes. Well, and I actually recently recorded an episode for my podcast, and it was about how to ask for a raise. And it comes back to exactly what you said in the sense of how are you creating value? And so that's my advice is when you go, it's not about your personal situation or I have to drive or groceries are expensive. Like they don't care. The company doesn't care. They don't want to hear it. They're doing the same thing. Gas is more
Right.
expensive for them, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like go into it with data about how you create value,
Yeah.
not how you're busy, but like what is it? And like that's what you have to do. So
Absolutely.
I think that message, while typically I'm working with the employer, I think it applies to the people too. And
Sure.
they
Oh, it does.
that's the perspective
Yeah.
they should have to be like, if your question of, the thing they want to know is, well, how do I get more money?
Yeah.
Creating value and being able to advocate.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
wouldn't it be awesome if an employer could actually help a person understand that?
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
day one, that you could give that to somebody. In my value centric leadership process, this is basically also the basis of a performance appraisal.
Yes.
And we call it in that world, it's really a contribution appraisal because
Yeah.
that's what matters. It's not
Yes,
your
I
it
like that.
really isn't your performance, strictly
Yeah.
speaking. It's what's your
Yeah.
contribution.
Yeah.
But if you can give that to someone day one and say, if you want to impress somebody, you want to get a raise, you want to get a promotion, you want to feel good about yourselves, deliver like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Now, I know that you've said that, sometimes you get pushback from HR for some of these ideas.
yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It's mostly because what I'm saying is well, goes back to part one of the book. The the stuff about the what a lot of real research, peer reviewed research that's been around for a long time, has to say about what personality testing really
Mm,
doesn't do, where we got this stuff, and what it actually is, what it's all really based on, if it's based on sometimes anything, uh, and competency modeling, what such research as there is, what does it really say about these things? And
yeah,
a lot of the learning approaches that companies spend gazillions of dollars on. What are
yeah,
the realities on this? And a lot of it is just nonsense. It just
yeah.
is.
It sounds
And
like,
nobody
maybe
spends,
people are looking for a quick or an easy solution that's,
yes,
"Here's a link, takes this test, and that's gonna tell us everything,"
yes,
versus doing the work to say, "For our specific organization and for your specific job,
yeah.
this is what a value contribution looks like."
Yes, and I will tell you, by the way, in our profession's defense, when I was doing the research for this book, one of the things that really surprised me, I had always assumed that the default was, it all got in there because of these mushy-headed HR people, that are just suckers for the marketing. That's not true at all. It really came in because of the presidents of companies. And it's still, and since I got this book out, it's been remarkable how many people have shared stories with me. One person, just one among many, who said, she was an HR director for a company, and the boss would just go through all these different personality tests because he's convinced there's one out there that's really looks into the soul and really has it. And he just went through all these, and of course he never found it
Yeah.
because it isn't there, and actually there's some and I cite some of this in the book, but there are some fascinating other books, and one in particular I think it's the most underrated HR book of the last 20 years. I really mean that, called Chasing Stars, and the subtitle is The Myth of Talent and the Portability of Performance. And it basically shows the idea that we find the person who was successful in one job and we plug them into our place and they're going to replicate the same thing. This a Harvard business guy, Boris Groysberg, he put that to the test and found out no, it really doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
And he's got some fascinating reasons as to why. It was very formative for me in the whole process of all this stuff.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to
But
check that one out.
yeah, it's a great book. It's dense, it's small type, and if you're not really into this stuff, it's going to be tough to get through. But
I'm a huge HR nerd, so I'm gonna
well,
love
then you're going to love it.
it.
It's a remarkable book. And it got some attention when it came out, but nobody really wanted to think through the implications of what he was saying. And
Well, yeah. Well, and
and
I'm gonna tell all of our listeners, read that one after they read "It's All in Your Head: Why
thank you,
Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees." So start there
thank you.
and then go here.
Well, if you go to mine, I'll give you you'll find, what were the key findings of Groisberg. So, you'll little economy there to find cheaper, I think. But anyway, um, but but the thing about it is, of course, we can all admit, beyond the boss stuff, there are a lot of HR people that got their promotions, their seat at the table by bringing this stuff in, and a lot of people are looked upon as HR people that are into this stuff, like, oh, they've got the secret insight, into people, and so they can, they're the ones that help us figure out who somebody really is before they walk in the
Mhm.
door and everything. And it just, they've got a lot invested in that. But I would honestly say this, and I passionately believe this, Becky. I mean, I really do. That I to those people who aren't going to want to hear this, if you will, I would honestly say this. I think we all recognize, and I think I've seen at least one of your guests talk about kind of why doesn't HR still have the seat at the table kind of stuff, right? And I truly believe that a big part of it is because this is what people are investing in, and it doesn't really. I've had so many managers who have read my book have come out and said, "I've always wondered this. Like we have to go through all this stuff every year, and I sit here and wonder what is the point? Does any of this
Mhm.
ever matter?" But I really believe if that HR is the best seated part of a business to truly lead the conversation around, let's understand what's the value that each job is here to create. So when that manager comes busting into your office and saying,
Yeah.
I got to get a job filled and I need, a bachelor's degree and 5 years experience, that the
Yeah.
real answer should be, okay, let's talk first about what contributions the job you want to bring in here are actually going to deliver. And then we'll
Yeah.
work back to
Yeah.
what would be the qualifications. But that's
Yeah.
not where we should be starting. But it is where we start most of the
I
time.
totally agree. I totally agree.
And it's
Yeah.
backwards.
It's we just I agree we need a shift in the way that we're thinking and then approaching, all things when it comes around talent,
Yeah.
because it really is again about what are they doing that's creating value, and it's
Yeah.
not having a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we probably all look at the I mentioned cite the one Gallup study. When they do their state of the workforce survey every year,
Yeah.
and this to me was I think it's one of the most important data points in the history of HR data. In 2024, they reported only 45% of workers strongly agree with the statement, "I know what is expected of me in my job." And to everybody that, your listeners that might be hearing all this and saying, "Look, this guy, I don't care what this guy says because I believe in all these things." I would only just say this, even if you're right, if it's all real and it's all true and it all looks into the soul and whatever else everybody's expecting it's supposed to do, how could any of it possibly make a difference if over half of the workforce really doesn't even know what the heck you want out of them?
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is like that's all there is to say. I
Yeah.
think. I think.
Then you're focusing on the wrong
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Barry, I really appreciate you coming on. I think that this is interesting, and I have not read your book yet, but am going to order it because I'm definitely interested to hear more about this because
Well,
I'm
thank
in
you.
agreement. So I look forward to
Thank you.
reading it. Again, our readers can go check that out. It's all in your head: Why Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees. And if people want to reach out to you and learn more, how can they contact you?
They can go to my website, which is www.argoshr.com, ARGOSHR.com. Hey, you can just go ahead and give me an email, which is it's B Wolfe with an E, BWOLFE at ARGOSHR.com. Would love to hear from you. Even
Perfect.
if you hate it, I can take it.
I
I'm
know,
an
it's fun
HR.
to hear. I love sometimes when I get, feedback on things where people think I'm, wild or completely disagree, and it's like, "All right, well, I'll talk about that too."
Yeah, why
Yeah,
not?
love it.
We're in
Well,
HR. We can
Barry,
take it.
thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic day and really appreciate your time.
Thank you again so much, Becky. Same to you as well. Really
Thank you.
appreciate the time. Great meeting you.
You too. All right, for our closing today, I love to do, oh my God, Becky, look at that comment. Well, today I only have good news to share. So, Guerrilla HR just celebrated 3 years in business, and I want to extend a huge thank you to all of my clients and my family and friends that have supported me in this journey. I did share this on social media and got lots of warm kudos. So, thank you to all of you, and let's have many more wonderful years together. Yay!
That's it for this episode of the Guerrilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@guerrilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time,